Few names from the Middle Ages capture the modern imagination like the Knights Templar. Warrior monks, wealthy landowners, financial administrators, and victims of dramatic persecution. Their story mixes religion, war, wealth, and politics. Today we'll trace who they were, how they rose, and why their fall still matters. This is a quick run-through of the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar began as a small fraternity in Jerusalem, founded shortly after the First Crusade. Around 1119 or 1120, a French knight named Hugues de Payens gathered a handful of companions. Their original purpose was straightforward: to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, which had become accessible to Western Europeans after the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. The order's full name was the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, a reference to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem where they were initially based. Early on, they followed a simple rule combining monastic vows, poverty, chastity, and obedience, with military duties. This hybrid role, monks who would fight, was unusual but increasingly attractive in the volatile environment of the Crusader states. Their public recognition came in 1129 at the Council of Troy, when church leaders and influential supporters formally endorsed the order and established a rule. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, a leading Cistercian abbot and influential churchman, strongly supported the Templars. His backing provided moral legitimacy and helped attract wealthy patrons in Europe. From modest beginnings, the Templars grew rapidly. They developed a strict hierarchical structure. A Grand Master oversaw the order, with knights, sergeants, squires, and chaplains below him. The order maintained its own chain of command and enjoyed considerable independence from local rulers, while remaining subject to papal authority. Their activities soon expanded beyond escorting pilgrims. They built castles, ran garrisons, and became an effective military force in the Crusader states. At the same time, donations of land, money, and privileges poured in from across Europe. This allowed them to establish a network of preceptories, or regional houses, which managed agricultural estates and other resources. Because of this network, the Templars also became involved in sophisticated financial and administrative activities. Money and valuables could be deposited with them in Europe and transferred to other Templar houses, allowing pilgrims and nobles to move wealth more safely over long distances. They were sometimes described as medieval bankers, but they were not a modern bank. Much of their financial activity grew from managing their own extensive properties and resources, as well as providing useful financial services to others. At their height in the 12th and early 13th centuries, the order had thousands of members and holdings across Western Europe and the Levant, but their fortunes remained closely tied to the Crusader cause. The decisive Muslim victory at the Battle of Hattin in 1187 led to the loss of Jerusalem and much of the Crusader territory, although the Templars remained an important military force for generations afterwards. The Crusader states continued to contract. In 1291, the great fortress city of Acre, the last major stronghold of the Crusaders in the Holy Land, fell to the forces of the Mamluk Sultanate. The Templars fought in its defense, and the loss of Acre was a devastating blow. Their original purpose, defending Christian territory and pilgrims in the Holy Land, had become increasingly difficult to fulfill. The order still possessed enormous international networks, property, wealth, and influence. But without a permanent Crusader state to defend, questions increasingly arose about the future role of the military orders. Their wealth and independence also attracted political attention at a time when European monarchies were becoming more centralized. The Templars' dramatic collapse began on a single day, October 13, 1307, when King Philip IV of France ordered the mass arrest of Templars in his realm. He accused them of heresy, blasphemy, corruption, and obscene rituals. Many of the confessions were extracted under torture, and some prisoners later retracted their statements. Why did Philip act? Historians continue to debate the precise balance of motives. The French crown was deeply indebted, and the Templars possessed considerable wealth and property. Philip may also have wanted greater control over an international organization that operated largely outside the authority of individual monarchs. His long-running conflicts with the papacy and his desire to strengthen royal authority may also have played a role. It is therefore too simplistic to say that Philip acted for one reason alone. Church involvement was complex. Pope Clement V attempted a legal inquiry into the accusations, but he faced considerable pressure from Philip. In 1312, at the Council of Vienne, Clement formally dissolved the Templar order. Their property was generally assigned to the Knights Hospitaller, although in practice the fate of Templar lands and revenues varied from region to region. Individual Templars also experienced very different fates, with some entering other religious orders or returning to secular life. The most famous Templar leader was Jacques de Molay, the order's last Grand Master. In 1314, after previously confessing to some of the charges and then retracting his confession, de Molay was burned at the stake in Paris. The suppression of the Templars had wider consequences. Politically, it highlighted the growing tensions between powerful monarchs and the papacy. It also demonstrated the vulnerability of an international institution when faced with a determined central government. Economically, Templar property and revenues were redistributed across Europe, although the extent of the wealth actually seized has sometimes been exaggerated. Culturally and historically, the Templars left a complicated legacy. Contemporary records show that many of the accusations were driven by political and financial circumstances, while most modern historians regard the more lurid allegations of secret heresy and obscene rituals as fabricated or heavily distorted. In later centuries, however, the Templars became figures of legend. Stories emerged about hidden treasure, secret rites, lost knowledge, and connections to mysterious traditions. Medievalists caution against confusing these later myths with the historical record. The real Templars are best understood through surviving documents, charters, papal correspondence, financial records, and trial records. These reveal an organization that was at once deeply religious, highly disciplined, militarily powerful, and deeply embedded in the economic and political life of medieval Europe. Their story matters because it illuminates the medieval networks of power, how religion, warfare, finance, and politics could intersect across borders. The Templars also demonstrate how institutions that crossed national boundaries could become focal points of conflict with increasingly centralized states. The Knights Templar began as guardians of pilgrims and became one of medieval Europe's most powerful military orders, only to be undone by the changing fortunes of the Crusader states, political rivalry, and the pressures of the 14th century. Their dramatic end and the myths that followed ensure they remain one of history's most compelling medieval stories. If you enjoyed this history of the Knights Templar, please like and subscribe for more concise history explainers. Let us know in the comments if there is anything you would have included in this brief summary of this topic.